Well, I never thought a Green Arrow Quantum Leap crossover was something I needed in my life, but here we are, talking about the fourth episode of the revived series of Quantum Leap entitled A Decent Proposal. If you are new here, spoilers ahead, so consider yourself warned. Okay, let's get into it. So this episode really did feel like the show finally running on all cylinders. Almost all of the problems I've been having up to this point were addressed at least in some manner in this episode. The characters in the present day setting, where I found most of my issues prior to this, they were given interesting things to do that really helped advance both their plot and to give us a greater understanding of the overall world and the inner workings of this new revived Quantum Leap series. We didn't spend an obscene amount of time in the present, just enough to kind of keep things moving forward. The leap pretty much held the focus of most of the episode, and while the reveal of Tammy Jean's true nature could be considered a rather significant historic event, it never felt that way. The story centered primarily on a pretty fun dynamic between Ben's leap subject, this being the first time he leapt into a woman, and her possible fiancé/bounty hunting partner on their wild ride of an adventure. This absolutely felt almost like a throwback to the type of show you might watch in the 80s, and that really did strike the right chord for me. So I do have to say, this is probably my favorite episode of the series thus far. So let's get into talking about the leap for a bit here. Of course, I do need to address the whole issue of Ben leaping into a woman for the first time. Of course, we had the customary scene of Ben as a woman being treated like crap by an overzealous guy at the bar who really couldn't take no for an answer. If this show was made 20 years ago, I wouldn't have even paid that any mind. I wouldn't have given it any attention aside from the fact that it happened and we moved past it. However, we're in 2022, and I absolutely know that this scene in particular is going to be used in all sorts of hate content and people claiming this show is a dumpster fire and blah, blah, blah. While I didn't find it necessarily the most interesting and the most fresh, unique thing they could have done, for me, it worked absolutely fine in service to the story. It didn't linger on it too long, and I really had no overall problem with it, and I just wanted to touch on it because I know it will be brought up if I don't. It was great to see the story begin to focus on a more interpersonal aspect. That's kind of what I've been calling for over the last couple of episodes, although it was paired with a rather fun action-adventure aspect. We see Ben as Ava have to track down a bail jumper with her partner/possible fiancé Zach, who just so happens to propose shortly after Ben arrives in this body. There are several layers to this whole thing. We get to see Zach and Ava, with Ben inside her, of course, work on their relationship, which originally fell apart in the Prime timeline. I'm not even sure if that's the way to describe it, in the timeline from whence Ben came. At the same time, they're tracking down the villain of the episode, called Tammy Jean. She plays the role of a woman who is in over her head, kind of trailing along behind her boyfriend who's in a life of crime, and she's just a little over her head, can't cope with it. However, the reveal later on proves that's not the case. She's actually the mastermind of the whole drug ring, and that was just an act she was playing. This is also all mixed together with the fact that Ben begins to recall his memory in his life with Addison. So there's really 3 layers deep of interpersonal relationships going on, all intermixed and kind of evolving and being solved within the context of the story overall. And that's just an extra added layer of the whole well-crafted storyline that they didn't really need. They could have stuck to just 2 storylines and we would have been fine, but the third layer in there really added a lot of depth, at least in my opinion. All of those elements mixed together are a hell of a lot to juggle, and they even threw in a very well-balanced story with the present at the same time, so nothing in this episode really felt out of place or wasted whatsoever. And while we're speaking about the present day stuff, we spend most of the time in the present with our character Ian and Magic, which is wonderful because as much as I like Ernie Hudson and as much as I seem to enjoy Magic, he hasn't been given much to do yet in this series. So to have Magic's backstory with Ian kind of explained in this episode really added that extra flavor that I think the future or the present storylines have been lacking up to this point. The main reason we figure out his backstory is it's revealed that Ian is going to have to go through all sorts of old files related to Magic, and some of those are classified, some of those are top secret, and he's going to find things out that he was not privy to before this. So before this happens, Magic kind of takes him aside and is going to explain to him all of these sealed files and what's really going on with the history of Magic in particular, especially in relation to the Project Quantum Leap. They go outside, grab a cup of coffee, and now Magic is deciding to spill all of the details. He decides now is the time to reveal all of his complicated history with the program. We learn for the first time in the actual show that Magic is alive and in this position due to the intervention of Sam Beckett's jump from the original Quantum Leap timeline. I think this might also be the first time that we really get a first-hand account of someone who was leaped into from the other side of the story. I say leaped here and not leapt as I had in previous episodes because Magic actually refers to it as leaped and not leapt, so I guess that's the terminology they're going to go with. He talks to Ian about how and when he was back in Vietnam, he kind of felt this warm presence taking over his body as if someone was gently nudging him, and he just decided to let this presence go. He decided to lean into it. And then he blacked out. He lost consciousness. When he woke up, his whole platoon was alive and somehow they had survived an event that pretty much was seeming death. He has no idea what happened. They were safe. But from that time forward, he had some sort of lingering residue in his mind of a picture of a person he couldn't quite realize. There was something in his mind that wasn't quite right that lasted with him throughout his entire life. So all of this backstory was actually shown in an original Quantum Leap episode. They actually showed footage from this episode to kind of remind us the whole backstory. That was an added touch they didn't need to do, so I do enjoy the fact that they even went back into the archives to show us a little something. Again, an extra mark for them by doing that. Once he rose to Admiral, he found out that his name was in sealed documents related to the Quantum Leap archives, and upon getting the clearance to look into them and figure out what was going on, he really discovered the whole story behind Quantum Leap, Sam Beckett, and how he, along with his entire group, were originally killed in the first timeline before Sam leaped into him and set things right. He then decided to take it upon himself to reopen the Quantum Leap program in order to try and go back and save Sam the way Sam had saved him. In my opinion, this is a very fascinating addition to lore. It seems more and more likely that this show is abandoning the idea of body swapping the way it happened in the original series. They're kind of simplifying things to a transference of consciousness, I believe. I wish they would give us an explanation exactly how they are doing this, because every moment they ignore the concept of the waiting room, there's just this little niggling thing in the back of my head that's feeling like something's a little off. If they don't explain it soon, it's probably just going to be a small nitpick, but I feel like if there's pre-established information that we have, it needs to be contradicted if it's not occurring anymore, and they haven't yet done that in a definitive manner. If they are doing the mind transfer instead of the body transfer, then that leads to the question of what's going on with Ben's body. Did his body dissipate into time? Did his mind leap out of his body, leaving his body in the present in a comatose state? Does Janice have his body? Is he in a hospital somewhere with no mind? Are the leapy subjects in his body? I don't think that's the case. Otherwise, we would have had some reference to people being in modern day out of time. I don't know. I just wish we could get a little minor explanation, even if it's a 2-line sentence that waves something away and it's not the answer that I really want. At least there would be an explanation there and it would leave me feeling a bit more satisfied. Back to the point I made about Magic and Sam earlier. So Magic claims that he had these visions after this incident through the rest of his life, kind of dreams or something, of a man's face. He could never place that face. He could never really figure out what it was until he got that clearance to look into the Quantum Leap archives, in which case he found the face of Sam Beckett staring back at him. And when he saw this face, it instantly clicked into place that, oh my God, this is the guy that was in my body and kind of took control of me during this blackout in Vietnam. Now, to me, this is a very fascinating wrinkle they just added to the show. Do all former Leapies have some form of memory of Sam? Is there always a blackout period that these people are waking up from? That feels like it might be setting something up for a larger story arc in the future. Maybe there's some groups out there that have people coming together that all have these common similar things, especially in the age of the internet. They could all set up message boards and say, hey, I've got this memory of this guy. I'm thinking of, alien abductee groups or something along the lines of, have you seen this man in your dreams? Maybe have you seen this man in my dreams is all related to some guy that's leaping into their body. Maybe in the Quantum Leap universe, the have you seen this man is Sam Beckett. I don't know. Definitely seems like something is being set up with this reveal. The leap ends up resolving with Ben and Zach finally catching the drug queen pin and leaving so that Ava has a chance to decide whether or not she's going to accept Zach's proposal or not. I do like that touch. Ben didn't decide to make the decision for her. He decided to set things right, leap out of the body, and then when Ava comes back into her own body, she can make this decision. I think it was a little bit of a cop-out to have Addison decide to tell Ben exactly how their future played out, but I'm not faulting them because for the most part in the original Quantum Leap, we always got that happy ending story. So it does feel right and it does feel earned. I just think it would have been a little interesting to leave it on a vague note. Maybe it's just me, but every so often I do enjoy a nice untied thread, something that's left up to the imagination and not 100% explained. I know that's a slight contradiction after I just said I want the waiting room thing tied up. The leap also ends with Ben remembering that Addison is the girl he left behind and kinda sorta remembering the fact that she is the fiancé he left. Very, very interesting because immediately after this recollection, he leaps away again and ends up in the Wild West. At least that's what it appears. So we are now well outside the established window for leaping, which means we just got two very interesting reveals right at the end of the episode, very much making me want to see where we go next. All told, I would have to say that this is definitely my favorite episode of the season thus far. Everything seemed to just work so well together, and there was not a single moment that I wasn't engaged in the storyline. I do have to say that no matter what Scott Bakula is saying out there, there is no chance in my mind that he doesn't show up by the end of the season, or at the very least, the beginning of season 2. I'm pretty sure this thing is leading to an ultimate rescue mission of Sam, only for him to tell Ben, Janice, Addison, anyone else who was there to listen in on the leap, that he doesn't need rescuing, tell them the whole story about how he met with God or the bartender or some anonymous figure. I don't know if they're going to go the whole Christian God route or not in this show, but he'll tell them the story that he doesn't need rescuing. He's actually leaping on his own so that he can do what's right for the world, set everything right, keep everything in order. And at this point, I believe he's going to offer to Ben the choice to either return home or continue leaping and help him out with his mission. And this is going to lead possibly Addison and or Janice down a dark path. Addison would have the feeling of betrayal that Ben did all the stuff behind her back and is now abandoning the family to go leaping through time, while Janice might have the feeling that her whole life through Al, her father, was founded on a lie that Sam simply could have prevented if he wanted to, something along those lines. Not sure if that's the way it'll work out, but that seems to me like a logical next step for where the story is heading. But what do you think? Are you enjoying the show? Do you hate it? Is it not living up to the original Quantum Leap? Whatever your thoughts, leave those below. While you're down there, hit the like button. And until then, I hope your next leap is the leap home.